June 11th, 1944. Combined Fleet Headquarters, Toyama, Tokyo. Rear Admiral Ryūnosuke Kusaka stood beside a tall, shuttered window, hands folded behind his back, trying and failing to ignore the humidity that clung to every wall of the room. Japanese summer heat turned even the most dignified admiral into a sweating, uncomfortable man. But Kusaka's mind was far from the weather. Across the room, a courier team had just placed a single leather-bound folder on the central planning table. A captured American operations file. Not a complete one. Not even a recent one. Reconnaissance floatplane from Chitose had found the debris inside a drifting life raft northeast of New Ireland after a skirmish with US aviators. Most of it was charred, much of it was unreadable, but one section, the only section, was intact enough for intelligence officers to label it with a single phrase: US carrier strike, launch protocol, fast response model. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Kusaka had not slept well since hearing that sentence. Now, as the other admirals filed into the room, older men with tired eyes, confident men who masked their worry behind decades of naval decorum, he felt a tightness forming in his chest, a sense of unease that he refused to allow onto his face. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, commander of the mobile fleet, entered last. Tall, gaunt, his spectacles perched lightly on the bridge of his nose. He gave Kusaka a small nod before taking his seat at the head of the table. Let us begin. A clerk dimmed the lights. Overhead fans, words, softly. The room fell still. Captain Haruto Nishiguchi, the combined fleet's most methodical intelligence officer, opened the folder. The Americans, he said, have changed their carrier doctrine. A thin ripple of quiet moved across the table. No one spoke. But every admiral leaned forward. Nishiguchi continued, voice steady. What we have recovered describes the latest operational procedure for their Essex-class carriers. We believe this was written in mid-1943, likely updated since. But even if this is only half accurate, it represents a significant change in American capability. He placed the first page on the board. A schematic, a deck diagram, and a single line printed across the top. Full strike package. Spotted, fueled, armed, and launched in 45 minutes. Kusaka felt his throat tighten. Several admirals frowned. One made a small noise, half disbelief, half irritation. Ozawa raised an eyebrow. Captain, he said calmly, we know American carriers are fast in their deck operations, but this suggests impossible efficiency. 90 aircraft prepared in 45 minutes? That means, Nishiguchi interrupted gently, they have abandoned the requirement to store all aircraft in the hangar before action. They spot aircraft on deck. They arm them on deck. They warm engines on deck. They launch in deck-load waves. Kusaka did not realize he had spoken aloud until he heard his own voice. But that is madness. A single spark could... Yes, Admiral, Nishiguchi said, but the Americans appear willing to risk it. The room fell silent. For a brief moment, Kusaka could hear the faint hum of traffic outside the compound, the clatter of distant bicycles on cobblestone, the murmuring of aides waiting beyond the doors. Everything else, the maps, the charts, the smell of ink, the too hot air, fell away. At last, Ozawa leaned back, fingers steepled. Explain precisely what this protocol means. Nishiguchi nodded once. He placed a transparency onto the illuminated table. A new diagram appeared. 3 blocks, representing time intervals. Under our system, he began, a fully coordinated strike from a carrier division requires between 90 minutes and 120. Longer, if the aircraft must be rearmed, or if the deck is cluttered from recovery operations. Everyone in the room knew this. It was the sacred doctrine of the Kido Butai. However, Nishiguchi went on, pointing to the next block, The American Essex-class carriers employ what they call a deck park. Aircraft remain topside during standby alert. When an attack order is received, there is no need to lower planes to the hangar, no need to reorganize the deck. They can begin fueling and arming immediately. He laid down a final page. In short, they can launch a full strike in half the time we can, sometimes in a third the time. A murmur swept through the room. Kusaka felt a cold heaviness forming in his stomach. He had commanded carrier groups for years. He had planned operations in the South Pacific, managed sorties at Santa Cruz, evaluated every known American tactic. But this was something altogether new. Finally, Ozawa spoke again. "And you are certain this document is legitimate?" Nishiguchi hesitated, only briefly. "It aligns with everything we have seen since the Gilberts and Marshalls. Their sortie rate is higher. Their deck cycles are faster. Their carriers are larger, but somehow operate more efficiently. We believe this document is accurate." Ozawa tapped the table lightly. "If this is true," he said, "then every engagement we have planned, every assumption of timing, must be reconsidered." An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Kusaka understood why. Japanese doctrine was elegant but rigid. The Kido Butai's system, once the most advanced in the world, was designed for perfect coordination. Planes armed below decks, planes coming up elevators in order. Strike groups meticulously arranged on the flight deck only after launch decision was confirmed. It required precision. It required time. And now, the Americans had eliminated time from the equation. Ozawa let out a quiet breath. "Continue." "Captain." Nishiguchi placed the next page on the projector. It showed a miniature sortie timeline. T equals 0 min. Strike alert issued T equals 5 mins. Aircraft spotted T equals 10 min. Fueling T equals 15-25 mins. Arming T equals 35 mins. Engine warm T equals 45 mins. Launch. A second diagram appeared beneath it. Japanese launch cycle T equals 0 min. Strike alert T equals 15 to 20 min. Hangar rearrangement T 25 40 min. Arming TL 40 16 60 min. Fueling TL CMT 70 80 95 sides min. Spotting on deck T 90 to 20 mins. Launch. The comparison was brutal. "This," Nishiguchi said softly, "is the difference between striking first and being struck." Kusaka felt heat rising behind his ears. That simple sentence, spoken so matter-of-factly, brought with it a terrible clarity. Strike first. The Kido Butai had lived its entire life by those words. At Pearl Harbor, in the Indian Ocean, at Darwin and Colombo. At the start of the war, the Japanese didn't just strike first, they struck before the enemy even knew they were present. Now the reverse was becoming true. "Admiral Ozawa," Nishiguchi said, "there is more." He placed the final document on the board, a table titled Maximum Deck Launch Capacity, Essex Class. It listed the number 94 aircraft. Ozawa's expression darkened. "That cannot be correct. Essex-class carriers typically carry 90 to 100 aircraft in total." "Yes," Nishiguchi said quietly. "This document implies they can launch essentially their entire complement in a single wave." Kusaka felt the room tilt slightly, as if a ship were turning beneath him. A single wave, a single strike, an entire air group. Something the Kido Butai had once prided itself on, coordinated mass attack, was now something the Americans could perform faster and at greater scale. Ozawa leaned forward. "If they can launch 90 planes in under an hour, how many can they launch with a task force of 5 carriers?" Kusaka answered before he realized it. 400. Maybe more. The room went utterly still. Ozawa sat back again, but the tension in his jaw betrayed the grave weight of the realization. "Then the battle we are preparing for," he said, "will not be like Midway, or Santa Cruz, or anything we have fought before." He paused, then spoke even more quietly. "It will be a battle of speed. And gentlemen, speed is on the American side." That night, Kusaka sat alone in his quarters, staring at the faint glow of a desk lamp. Outside, the courtyard trees rustled with warm wind. A lantern swung slightly in its bracket. Crickets chirped in the dark. He poured himself a small cup of tea, though he barely tasted it. 90 aircraft, 45 minutes. He had spent his entire career mastering the art of carrier warfare, studying deck cycles, launch sequences, formation timing. He knew precisely how long it took to ready a strike. He knew it in his bones. 45 minutes was impossible, or rather, it had been impossible for the Japanese. They simply lacked the deck space, the equipment, the training, the doctrine. But the Americans learned. He pulled the document closer to him and ran a finger along the margins of the page. The handwriting, English cursive, was neat and precise. The notes in the margins were practical, technical, concerned only with efficiency. No wasted effort, no ornamentation, no fear of risk. The opposite of Japanese doctrine. Kusaka closed the folder slowly. This discovery would change the coming battle, and the battle was coming soon. June 12th, 9:44. Aboard battleship Yamato, flagship of the Combined Fleet Admiral Suemu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, stood before his senior staff, hands clasped behind his back. The conference room aboard Yamato was polished, immaculate, a shrine to naval power. The map table dominated the center, covered in grid lines and island chains stretching across the Philippine Sea. Kusaka and Ozawa sat among the officers. The intelligence documents lay neatly stacked on the table beside the projector. Toyoda cleared his throat. "I have reviewed the captured American document," he began. "It suggests their carriers now launch at a speed far exceeding our own." Several officers stiffened. Toyoda continued, his voice calm but heavy. "Before we finalize the plan for Operation Ego, I want every senior officer present to fully understand what we face." He nodded to Kusaka. "Explain it." Kusaka stood slowly. He walked to the board, placed the diagrams carefully, and took a steadying breath. "Gentlemen," he began, "the Americans can now prepare and launch a 90-plane strike in 45 minutes. We require at least 90 minutes to do the same." He let the number hang in the air. "This means," Kusaka said quietly, "that if both sides spot each other at the same time, the Americans will launch first." Toyoda's voice broke the silence. "And the force that launches first usually wins," Kusaka finished. The implication was devastating. A junior staff officer swallowed hard. "What about the strength of our aviators?" he asked. "Their courage is unmatched." "Yes," Ozawa said gently, "but courage does not shorten launch times." Kusaka nodded. "In previous battles, our pilots carried the advantage of experience. Now, many of them are gone. Our new pilots are brave, but untested. Their training has been shortened. Their experience is limited." Toyoda gave a slow, solemn nod. "The Americans, by contrast, rotate their pilots. They keep their veterans alive. And their new aviators are trained thoroughly." He paused. "Combined with the ability to launch faster, this makes them formidable." Kusaka watched each officer in the room slowly confront the same truth he had confronted the night before, a truth they had hoped was not real. The Kido Butai was no longer the apex predator. It was the hunted. After the briefing, as officers filed out, Toyoda approached Ozawa and Kusaka quietly. "There is no avoiding this battle," Toyoda said. "We must protect the Marianas. If the Americans take Saipan, they will have bases within bomber range of Tokyo." He lowered his voice. "But I need to know. Honestly, do we still have a chance?" Ozawa met his gaze. "If we can strike first, we have a chance," he said. "And if we cannot—" Ozawa looked down at the documents, the diagrams, the times, the numbers. Then he looked back up, his expression controlled but grim. "Then," Ozawa said, "we will face a storm unlike any we have ever seen." Toyota exhaled, shoulders tight. "Very well, Admiral. Prepare the fleet." As Toyota left the room, Kusaka stayed behind, gathering the scattered documents. He felt the weight of them, heavy despite being just paper. 45 minutes, 90 aircraft, across 5 carriers, 400 planes in a single coordinated strike. He imagined what such a wave would look like. The sky dark with wings, engines roaring like endless thunder, a storm summoned in under an hour. He closed his eyes. This battle would be unlike Midway. There would be no element of surprise, no code-breaking trap, just raw speed, raw power, raw numbers. And the Americans had all three. Kusaka gathered the last sheet, slid it back into the folder, and whispered to himself, "God help us." Because he knew, long before the first American fighter appeared on the horizon, long before the Japanese fleet reached the Philippine Sea, that the battle had already tilted. June 13th, 1944, USS Enterprise, CV-6, at sea Pacific Ocean. The morning dawned with an almost deceptive calmness. A warm breeze carried the scent of salt and the distant promise of sun, but aboard the Enterprise, the atmosphere was taut with anticipation. In the ready room, Commander John Jack Harper leaned over a chart table, studying the latest reconnaissance reports with sharp, steady eyes. The ship was alive, with quiet urgency. Flight crews moved with practiced precision, each man aware that the coming days might demand everything they had. Mechanics inspected engines, ordnance officers double-checked ammunition stowage, and lookouts scanned the endless horizon. "Jack," called Lieutenant Sarah Miller from the entrance. She was the ship's communications officer, a quick mind behind the tangled mess of radio traffic. "We just got word from Hornet. They spotted a large Japanese fleet heading south about 250 miles from our current position." Harper nodded. "Any indication of composition?" 5 carriers, several battleships, and a screen of destroyers. The usual Kido Butai signature. Harper exhaled slowly. The intelligence had confirmed what everyone feared. The Japanese were moving to intercept them near the Marianas. The next few days would decide control of the Pacific. He turned back to the chart. "Prepare the air groups for immediate launch readiness," he ordered. "Keep the decks clear and fuel tanks topped. We're going to need every plane in the air, fast." June 13th, 1944. Yamato, Command Bridge, Philippine Sea. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa stood before his fleet's commanding officers, his face set like granite. The earlier intelligence briefing haunted the room like a specter. The captured American protocols had changed everything. Speed was no longer a luxury. It was survival. "Admirals," Ozawa began, "the Americans have shown an ability to launch strikes faster than we can respond. They will attempt to overwhelm us with their numbers and tempo." The officers nodded grimly. They had trained for war. But this new dimension of speed unsettled even the most seasoned. Ozawa continued, "Our strategy must account for their ability to strike first. We will prepare our fighters to defend aggressively during the early minutes of the battle. We must disrupt their launch cycles." Captain Haruto Nishiguchi, standing beside him, added, "The Americans' deck park system means they can recover and relaunch aircraft quickly. We cannot afford to give them the space to refuel and rearm once the battle begins." Ozawa nodded. "Prepare for continuous air patrols. We will use every available fighter to harass their carriers. Their deck will be crowded, making operations riskier." But beneath the tactical discussion lay a deeper concern: the sheer scale of the American fleet. 5 carriers, muttered Rear Admiral Kusaka. 400 aircraft, if they can launch in waves as quickly as we believe. "Then we face a storm of steel," Ozawa finished. June 14th, 1944. Dawn, USS Lexington. CV-16. Flight deck officer Lieutenant Commander Richard Dick Bennett paced the deck as dawn broke. The early light reflected off the glossy wings of fighters and dive bombers, each polished and ready. "Deck crews," he barked. "Secure all aircraft topside. We want them spotted and ready. Fueling teams, stations, armaments, prep. Men hustled. The deck buzzed with coordinated energy. Bennett knew the Americans' doctrine well, to keep planes ready on deck to launch without delay. The deck park system was risky, but it paid dividends in speed. A burst of static crackled from the radio. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Enemy fleet sighted northwest. Task Force 58 is moving to intercept. The tension ramped instantly. Aircraft crews began final checks. Pilots climbed into cockpits. Engines rumbled to life. Bennett climbed to his observation post. His gaze swept the horizon, searching for the first glint of the enemy. June 14, 1944, nightfall, Yamato, flag bridge. Admiral Toyama stood alone, staring at the illuminated map table. The Philippine Sea spread beneath his fingertips like a chessboard, soaked in moonlight. The fleet's position, the American carrier's suspected location, the vital islands of Saipan and Tinian, all points in a deadly game. Toyota whispered, "The American speed will be our undoing. But we will fight. We must." The heavy cruiser Atago signaled urgent reconnaissance reports. Several floatplanes returned with photographs of American carriers spotted northwest. Ozawa and Kusaka arrived. "Sir," Kusaka said, "we will conduct early fighter sweeps. We will strike as soon as possible, but we must be ready for a rapid American counterstrike." Toyota nodded. "Our pilots are prepared. Let us hope their courage can match their speed." June 15, 944. Morning. USS Enterprise. Flight deck. The first wave of American aircraft prepared for launch. Fighters, dive bombers, torpedo bombers, all stood in tight formation on the deck. Lieutenant Commander Harper walked among the pilots, offering last-minute words of encouragement. "Remember, speed is our ally. Get in, strike hard, and get out before they know what hit them." The deck crew signaled final clearances. "Launch!" Engines roared. Aircraft surged forward in a thunderous stampede of power and precision. From the bridge, Captain Miller observed, "Strike package launched in 42 minutes, right on schedule." Harper allowed himself a brief smile. The system worked. June 15th, 1944. Yamato, main battle group. Ozawa's fleet scrambled to respond. Japanese fighters took to the sky in rapid defensive sweeps, engines screaming. But the Americans' ability to launch waves within minutes of one another overwhelmed the defenses. The air above the ocean became a chaotic storm. Fighters dogfought fiercely. Dive bombers searched for their targets. Torpedo bombers braved heavy anti-aircraft fire. Ozawa watched grimly. The Americans' first wave hit hard. One Japanese carrier, Taiho, was struck by a torpedo. The explosion tore through the flight deck. Fire erupted. Damage control teams fought desperately, but the Americans were already preparing their next wave, launched just 37 minutes after the first. The Japanese fleet reeled. June 16, 1944. Evening. Aftermath of first engagement. The Japanese command convened aboard Yamato. The damage was severe. Taiho was lost. Shokaku sustained heavy damage. Admirals reviewed reports. Ozawa's face was grim. "Their speed has outmatched us. We must adapt, or be destroyed." Kusaka added, "We underestimated their operational efficiency. Our doctrine must evolve. We must accept risk on the deck." Toyota sat silently. The war was turning, and the Americans had the upper hand. June 17th, 1944. Pre-dawn, USS Enterprise. CV-6. Pacific Ocean. The deck was alive with movement before the first light had broken over the horizon. The smell of aviation fuel mixed with salt spray as the Enterprise's crew hustled efficiently, their motions fluid from months of relentless training. Every second counted. Commander John Harper stood at the edge of the flight deck, watching the readiness of his air group with a calm but intense focus. The reports had confirmed what every sailor and pilot already suspected. The Japanese fleet was weakened, but still dangerous. From the flagship bridge, Captain Sarah Miller, gripping binoculars, scanned the horizon. The vast ocean seemed peaceful, but it was only a surface calm. Far below the waves, the tides of war churned violently. "Commander Harper," Miller reported over the comms, Recon reports confirm the Japanese carriers are regrouping approximately 150 miles northwest. Shikaku and Zuikaku are still operational but damaged. Tai-Ho lost to torpedo hits. Harper nodded, his face hardening. We'll keep the pressure. Launch the next wave on my mark. I want every plane fueled, armed, and ready to launch in under 45 minutes. We have to maintain the tempo. The American Navy's deck park system was a high-stakes gamble. Planes were parked wingtip to wingtip, fueled and armed, exposed to the elements and enemy fire. It was dangerous, but it allowed the Enterprise and her sister ships to launch strikes faster than any fleet in history. Below decks, ordnance crews scrambled amid a jungle of torpedoes, bombs, and fuel lines. Every man knew a mistake could trigger disaster, but discipline was razor-sharp. The clock was their enemy, yet also their guide. Lieutenant Commander Bennett, overseeing deck operations on the Lexington, barked orders. Clear the deck ahead for the next group. Arm the torpedoes on the port side. Double-check the fuel lines. The flight deck became a mechanical dance, every move choreographed to the beat of urgency. On the Japanese side, Admiral Ozawa knew time was against them. The loss of Tai-Ho was a critical blow, but it also signaled a deeper failure. The Americans had mastered rapid launch and recovery in a way Japan's doctrine couldn't match. We must innovate, Ozawa told his officers. Our traditional tactics are obsolete. Captain Nishiguchi, his face etched with fatigue and resolve, agreed. We will modify our flight operations, launch aircraft with less preparation, accept the risks of deck congestion. We must strike first or we will lose. Yet despite the willingness to adapt, the Japanese were hampered by systemic limitations, less efficient deck layout, cautious doctrine, and the psychological weight of recent losses. The shadows of Midway lingered heavily. By mid-morning, the Enterprise's decks were alive with the roar of engines. The second strike wave was forming, a mix of Hellcats, Avengers, and dauntless dive bombers. Pilots climbed into cockpits, faces grim and focused. Commander Harper addressed his strike leader, Lieutenant Tom Andrews. This wave must hit hard and fast. Our carriers can't sustain prolonged engagement. You'll have 45 minutes from launch to impact. Precision and speed are key. Andrews nodded. Helmet gleaming in the sunlight. As the planes lined up, the flight deck crew counted down the seconds. Launch in 10, 9, 8. The planes surged forward, taking flight in a rolling thunder of power. High above the ocean, the skies erupted into chaos. Japanese fighters swarmed to meet the incoming American strike, while intense anti-aircraft fire stitched the air with lethal bursts. Dive bombers sliced through the clouds, releasing their payloads with deadly accuracy. Torpedo bombers weaved through defensive fire, aiming for the vulnerable hulls below. On the Shokaku, alarms blared as explosions rocked the flight deck. Damage control teams leapt into action, battling fires and flooding. Vice Admiral Ozawa gritted his teeth. They strike faster than we can respond, he muttered. Yet, the Japanese launched their own counterstrike. Fighters roared off the decks of the surviving carriers in a desperate attempt to disrupt the American attacks. As afternoon wore into evening, reports filtered through. The Japanese had lost Tai-Ho completely. Shokaku was badly damaged, her flight deck buckled and burned. Zuikaku sustained hits, but remained operational. Her fighters, the fleet's last shield. On the American side, the carriers had taken hits but remained afloat and operational. The Enterprise had suffered minor damage and Lexington was holding steady, yet the toll in men and aircraft was growing. Harper sat in the ready room, exhausted. This isn't over, he said to Miller. They'll regroup. We need to be faster, sharper. Miller nodded. The speed we can launch gives us an edge, but it's only a matter of time before they catch up. June 18th, 1944. Dawn broke cold and grey over the Pacific. On the bridge of the Enterprise, Captain Miller felt the weight of responsibility like never before. Every decision, every command rippled across the vast ocean, shaping the fate of thousands. The fleet was battered, but unbroken. Admiral Ozawa's forces were retreating, their remaining carriers crippled and vulnerable. But the Japanese fighting spirit remained fierce, their pilots flying with a desperate intensity born of survival. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Commander Harper walked the deck alone. The air was thick with salt and smoke, the ghosts of the day's battle lingering in every corner. He paused, looking up at the stars. The battle had proven the critical advantage of speed. The American carriers could launch strikes in under 45 minutes, keeping constant pressure on the enemy. It was a new kind of warfare, one where every second counted and hesitation could mean annihilation. Harper's voice was quiet but firm. This is the future of naval combat. Whoever masters the speed of victory controls the seas. The Battle of the Philippine Sea, later dubbed the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, became a turning point. It marked the definitive end of Japanese naval aviation dominance. The Americans' ability to launch, recover, and relaunch aircraft faster than any fleet before had shattered Japan's offensive capacity. Japanese admirals, once confident and proud, faced the bitter reality. Their doctrine, once invincible, had been eclipsed by the relentless tempo and efficiency of American carrier operations. Many reflected on the day they realized a single American carrier could have 90 aircraft ready to launch in under 45 minutes, a tactical revolution that left their entire battle plan in ruins. June 19, 1944, USS Enterprise, CV-6, Pacific Ocean. The night after the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot was quiet, but the stillness was deceptive. Beneath the calm surface, the war's currents were shifting with an irreversible force. The Enterprise and her sister ships had just delivered a devastating blow to the Imperial Japanese Navy's carrier air arm, but the cost had been significant. Wounded men and shattered aircraft littered hangar decks. The echoes of battle still resonated in the weary minds of commanders and crew alike. Captain Sarah Miller, her uniform stained with soot and sweat, sat alone in her quarters. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound breaking the silence. Her thoughts traveled back to the moment she first realized just how profoundly the speed of American carrier operations had reshaped the naval war. She opened her worn journal and began to write. For years, we fought with valor and skill, but it was the tempo that finally won this battle. The ability to launch 90 aircraft in under 45 minutes was not just a feat of logistics. It was the weapon that broke the enemy's will. In the command center, Admiral Raymond Spruance, aboard the heavy cruiser New Orleans, was reviewing the latest damage assessments. The American fleet had emerged battered but victorious. The Japanese losses were staggering. 4 carriers destroyed, hundreds of aircraft lost, and thousands of sailors dead or captured. The survivors who remained were in full retreat, nursing wounds that would take years to heal, if they ever did. Spruance's quiet demeanor belied the intense pressure he carried. His cautious nature had earned him the nickname Electric Brain, but the electric tension in the command room was palpable. "Captain Miller," he said, speaking through the radio, "your air group's performance was outstanding. The rapid launch sequence saved countless lives and turned the tide of this engagement." Miller responded with a firm, "Thank you, Admiral. Our crews trained for this moment. It was their discipline and resolve that made it possible." "Indeed. But the Japanese will adapt, and we must be ready. Their resolve is not yet broken." Across the vast Pacific, at the naval base in Truk Lagoon, remnants of the Japanese fleet regrouped in somber silence. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita, a seasoned officer known for his stern leadership, stared at a map illuminated by a single, flickering lamp. The lines representing Japanese forces were shrinking rapidly under the pressure of American advances. Kurita's mind was heavy with bitter lessons learned. The Japanese had underestimated the speed and efficiency of American carrier operations. Their traditional doctrines, painstakingly developed over decades, had been rendered obsolete in the span of a few battles. He recalled conversations with other admirals. Nagumo's cautious hesitation at Midway, Ozawa's desperate attempts to keep pace, Yamaguchi's final stand aboard the Hiryu. They had all grappled with the same shocking realization. American carriers could launch overwhelming strikes in under an hour, crippling Japanese formations before they could properly react. Kurita's voice was grim as he addressed his officers. "Our enemy's tempo is unmatched. We must reconsider our strategies. Speed is not just a tactic. It is the essence of modern naval warfare." Back on the American side, Military strategists in Washington pored over battle reports. The destruction of Japan's carrier air power at the Philippine Sea was hailed as a pivotal moment. But the implications stretched far beyond the immediate victory. Naval historian Captain James Halsey summarized it best in a debriefing. The key takeaway is the shift from attritional warfare to tempo-based dominance. Speed in aircraft launch, recovery, refueling, and rearming is the decisive factor. Control of the skies depends not just on aircraft quality or pilot skill, but on the ability to maintain relentless pressure. This realization influenced the rapid expansion and modernization of the American carrier fleet. New classes of carriers were designed with greater deck space, advanced elevators, and automated fueling and ordnance systems, technologies intended to shave precious minutes off launch cycles. On board the Enterprise, Chief Petty Officer Samuel "Sam" Rogers reflected on the technological leaps that made their speed possible. He had joined the Navy during the early days of the war, when carrier flight decks were still a chaotic jumble and planes launched with hesitation and delay. Now, every inch of the deck was optimized. Pneumatic catapults replaced the older hydraulic systems, launching planes faster and farther. Deck crews used advanced signal lights and radio communications to synchronize launches with clockwork precision. The entire ship functioned as a single organism, breathing and moving as one. Sam remembered a conversation with a young pilot named Lieutenant Mike Harper. "Sam," Mike had said, eyes gleaming, "the Japanese think we win because of better planes, but it's this rhythm, this pace. We're like a machine they're still playing catch-up." Sam nodded. "They'll try to match it, but it's not just hardware, it's the mindset." Yet, amid the mechanized efficiency and technological marvels, the human toll was unmistakable. Lieutenant Claire Watson, a nurse assigned to the Enterprise's medical bay, witnessed the aftermath of relentless air battles daily. Pilots with shattered limbs, burn victims from hangar fires, and aircrew suffering from exhaustion lined the wards. She recounted in her diary, "The speed at which these men face death is staggering. One moment they're launching in formation, the next they're fighting for their lives. The machine of war moves fast, too fast sometimes." Despite the losses, morale remained high. The belief in their mission to end the war and bring their comrades home gave strength to every sailor and airman. The realization that a single American carrier could launch 90 aircraft in under 45 minutes created a psychological shockwave in Japanese command circles. Commander Mitsuo Fushida, the veteran air operations officer who had once spearheaded the attack on Pearl Harbor, reflected bitterly in a private letter, "We thought the initiative was ours, that we were the hunters. The Americans showed us we were the prey." This shift eroded the confidence that had sustained the Imperial Navy for so long. Many officers felt their doctrine, their honor, and their very future slipping away. By late 1944, as American forces pushed closer to Japan's home islands, the lessons of the Philippine Sea battles informed every operation. Carrier groups launched strikes with unprecedented speed and precision. The tempo of combat accelerated, leaving little time for the enemy to react or regroup. In Washington, planners prepared for the ultimate challenge, the invasion of Okinawa and, eventually, the Japanese mainland. The capacity to launch and recover aircraft in rapid succession would be crucial in supporting amphibious operations and countering kamikaze attacks. Captain Sarah Miller stood once more on the Enterprise's flight deck as the ship sailed toward Okinawa in early 1945. The war had taken its toll, but the spirit of the crew was unbroken. "We fight not just with machines and weapons," she told her officers, "but with the will to persevere, to innovate, and to protect those who come after us." Her words resonated deeply. The legacy of rapid launches, unyielding pressure, and adaptability was not merely a tactical advantage. It was a symbol of American resolve. The speed at which the American carriers could ready their air groups was more than a technical achievement. It was a revolution that reshaped the Pacific War. Japanese admirals' disbelief at this capability underscored a harsh truth: mastery of time and tempo was as critical as mastery of firepower. As the sun set over the Pacific, the Enterprise and her sister ships sailed onward, carrying with them the weight of sacrifice and the promise of a decisive victory. The war was far from over, but the tide had irrevocably turned. Despite the technical marvels and strategic insights, the heart of rapid carrier operations beat in the hands and minds of thousands of sailors and airmen. The disciplined coordination that allowed 90 aircraft to launch in under 45 minutes depended on countless individuals performing their roles with precision under intense pressure. Petty Officer Sam Rogers often thought about the hidden stories behind the machinery. There was the ordnance crew working tirelessly to arm planes with bombs and torpedoes, each package potentially a death sentence for enemy ships, but also a risk to their own lives, if mishandled. There were the deck handlers braving sudden gusts of wind or the chaos of a crowded flight deck to position aircraft with exacting accuracy, pilots prepared in cramped ready rooms mentally rehearsing every maneuver, their hands steady despite the tension. One night, after a grueling mission, Sam found himself sharing a quiet cigarette with Lieutenant Mike Harper near the ship's rail. "You ever think about what happens if just one person slips?" Mike asked, eyes fixed on the stars. Sam nodded slowly. "That's the thing. We can't afford slips. Not even a second lost." They fell silent, the weight of those unspoken moments lingering. On the other side of the conflict, the shock of American operational speed clashed harshly with Japanese naval traditions. Japanese doctrine had long emphasized precision, honor, and careful deliberation. Decisions were often weighed slowly, seeking perfection rather than rapid action. This cultural contrast magnified the psychological impact of American tempo. Vice Admiral Kurita, in conversations with junior officers, lamented, "We train for flawless execution, but the enemy moves like a storm. Swift, overwhelming, and relentless. Our honor demands perfection, but the war demands speed." For many in the Japanese Navy, adapting to this new paradigm was not merely a matter of tactics, but of identity. The loss of 4 carriers at Midway and the staggering defeat at the Philippine Sea forced painful introspection. Some officers privately questioned whether their traditions, which had guided the empire's naval power for decades, could survive in a war increasingly defined by speed and industrial scale. The American Navy's ability to project air power with speed and precision also influenced broader Allied war planning. In meetings of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, commanders debated the potential to leverage carrier strike groups to support land campaigns across the Pacific. General Douglas MacArthur, coordinating the push through the Philippines and toward Japan, emphasized the importance of carrier air superiority. "Without the ability to launch rapid, overwhelming strikes from the sea," MacArthur said, "our ground forces would face insurmountable challenges. The tempo of carrier operations dictates the tempo of the entire campaign." This inter-service cooperation underscored how naval innovations transcended their domain, shaping the broader trajectory of the war. Technological advances fueled these. Increase in launch speed. Pneumatic catapults replaced older hydraulic systems, providing faster and more reliable aircraft launches. Deck crews used electric deck handlers and improved communication systems to coordinate movements with near-silent efficiency. The development of new aviation fuel storage methods and streamlined ordnance handling systems reduced turnaround times dramatically. Automation began creeping into refueling processes, decreasing manual labor and increasing safety. These innovations were the unsung heroes behind the rapid launch numbers, a testament to engineering excellence married with relentless operational demand. The lessons learned in the heat of battle had far-reaching consequences. After the war, the US Navy invested heavily in carrier designs optimized for rapid flight operations, setting a standard that persists in modern naval aviation. Training programs evolved to emphasize coordination, timing, and adaptability. The culture of tempo warfare became ingrained in naval doctrine and spread to Allied navies worldwide. In this way, The remarkable ability to launch 90 aircraft in under 45 minutes became not just a historical milestone, but a foundational pillar for future naval dominance. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.